This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What is good, everybody? Hope you had a wonderful Labor Day long weekend. We are back at it today on this Tuesday afternoon here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Great to have you with us, Andrew Paterson, along with Michael Remis, and we have a packed show. So much to get to coming out of the weekend. The Bombers beat down of the Riders in the annual Labor Day Classic, which leads us to the rematch this Saturday at IG Field, Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. in the Banjo Bowl. We've got the Red Hot Blue Jays, some incredible performances by Canadians at the U.S. Open, and finally a little closure to the Jesperi Kotkaniemi saga between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes, which became clear over the course of the weekend. Jeff Hamilton's going to join us. Jeff, of course, was in Regina all weekend covering the Labor Day Classic and the Bombers' big win. We'll bring a hammer on coming up in about 15 minutes on the program. And we are now just 2 days away from NFL Kickoff. I cannot wait. Zig Fracassi from SiriusXM NFL Radio will pop on. We might be able to touch on a little bit of pucks with the Zig as well, but I know a lot of people, everyone is feeling it today. Their team 0-0. There's a lot of hope no matter who you're cheering for right now. Well, outside of maybe if you're a Houston Texans fan or maybe the Lions, but there's a lot of excitement going into NFL season. And I'll tell you what, Bomber fans that are with us in the chat right now feeling pretty darn good about that big win in Regina on Sunday afternoon. Right off the bat, want to thank all of our sponsors, including our newest sponsor, Manitoba Battery, our friends over at Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, Canadian Club, Not Autocorp, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Assiniboia Downs, and of course, Cool Bet Canada. Stay tuned. We've been promising for the last couple of weeks that we were going to have a very special prize for Banjo Bowl week with our friends at Canadian Club. I'll tell you about that a little later on in the program, but what you're going to want to do is pay attention to all of our social channels at Sports Talk Winnipeg on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You'll have an opportunity to enter there. We're going to take 10 entries from each platform and give away our great prize coming up on Friday's show heading into the Banjo Bowl. And I told you about this last week. Speaking of Friday, really excited to do a first ever sort of live show. Now, while it won't technically be Winnipeg Sports Talk, I think it will serve as somewhat of a WST meetup. Remis is going to be down there with us. Dustin Nielsen is coming in to call the Banjo Bowl. And of course, we got to do a lock shop going into week 1 of the National Football League. So Dusty's going to join me. Cool Bet Chris Abbott is coming to town for it as well. So Friday night, 7 p.m. with our friends down at Boston Pizza City Place. Pop down, join us, have some wings, pizza, a few cold ones. We'll talk some NFL. We'll bang out a lock shop, and it should be a real fun start to Banjo Bowl weekend. Let's get to it and welcome in Michael Remis to the program. Remo, how was your long weekend, dude?
Lovely long weekend. I'm trying to remember what I did. Feels like it was a long time ago. Not long enough, apparently, or too long. I went to the beach, got a last, weekend at the beach. Went for a bike ride, suited up, put on the skate test yesterday for the first time.
How did that go?
Time in like a year. I think I was out of breath after 20 minutes. I had enough. But I toughed it out. And then what else do we get done? Watch the football, CFL all weekend Friday. And I went to the zoo. One last look at the dinosaurs for me at the zoo. So that was my weekend.
Squeezing just another game out of the squeezing out another game out of that season pass.
Yes.
For I'll tell you what, that is, I got to tell you, this weekend was amazing. The game, first and foremost, was phenomenal. Shout out to all the Bomber fans that were repping the Winnipeg Blue Bombers out in Regina. Unfortunately, missed the game this year. And I'm not sure. I'm going to talk to Jeff. It'll be interesting to see. And for those of you that went, certainly hit us up in the chat about the numbers that went to it. I mean, I saw some pictures from Wayne's World, which is usually an absolute madhouse before the game. And I did see some pics, and there wasn't, I mean, the crowd was nowhere like what it is in normal years. So I'm interested as to whether, just considering the different situations with attendance and vaccination and all that, whether some people decided to opt out. One thing I do know that I can guarantee is that the Banjo Bowl is going to be bananas. I did see that the Bombers said that there are few tickets left, but there are still tickets available. So would love to see that place fully sold out for the game on Saturday afternoon. And Remo, considering what the Bombers did to the Riders on the weekend, the Bombers fans are going to be going in with a lot of confidence, as should the team be. But there still will be a lot of green making the trip, and the Riders are going to feel like they owe the Bombers one after the way the Bomber defense in particular absolutely dominated for 60 minutes on Sunday.
Ooh, what a game. I think we got to reset those MOP odds because Cody Fajardo definitely did not look like a guy. I said to you before the show, my brother, who's a casual Bomber fan, tuned in for the game. He's like, man, this Roughriders quarterback is not good. And I'm like, he's actually leading the MOP race right now. He's like, seriously? And I mean, that just shows you how dominant the Bombers defense are. I mean, you have two of the best pass rushers in the league. Probably two of the best in Willie Jefferson, who is an absolute beast. And you talk about free agent signings. I know the Andrew Harris one, franchise changing, but this Willie Jefferson, I mean, I would not want to block that guy. Jackson Jeffcoat as well, making a name for himself. Adam Bighill, former Defensive Player of the Year. And then you had the secondary, coming up, making the big interceptions. Brandon Alexander, Dietrich Nichols, who's in a rookie season. I mean, he's been excellent for, rookie. So the Bombers defense, watch out. They've, shut down. They had one off game, but I think maybe they were looking ahead to the Roughriders, and really, that was a statement win. Because if you had, maybe the Bombers were knocked off the top of the power rankings for like 1 week, but I mean, they are clearly the top team in the CFL right now.
Shout out to everybody in chat. A lot of comments on the Blue Bomber defense and that performance on the weekend. They were great. Listen, before we get to the defense, though, I do want to talk about a couple things on offense. First of all, Andrew Harris, once again, yes, continuing to run the ball. Is there a better running back anywhere of getting yards after contact? Honestly, every single time he got hit, he'd wiggle around and he'd get 2 or 3 extra yards. It was, there's an experienced guy that knows what it is about, and he does every single thing he possibly can to max out yardage every time the football's in his hands. And then, of course, he almost had one of the great hurdles in CFL history.
Oh, what do you mean? Almost? That was one of the great hurdles. What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying,
jump over the guy.
He ended up going down. He got so high on that. I mean, credit to, I think it was Gainey maybe that made the tackle. I mean, that guy's probably 6'2", and he was fully standing up and just caught a piece of Harris with his shoulder. It was amazing. But on offense, the thing that stuck out to me the most, Remis, was the bounce back of the receivers. We talked a lot about the drops that had been plaguing the Bomber offense for a couple weeks. And first and foremost, we talked about Kenny Lawler, who had a couple last week, Rasheed Bailey, but Drew Wolatarski he wasn't getting a ton of balls. And when they did, he'd had a couple drops. And all of those players came up with massive catches on contested balls. And I'll tell you what, dude, the catch of Wolatarski completely laying out in the air and catching that pass from Zach Caleros. Now, in some ways, it was a perfect pass because there was absolutely no way it was going to be picked off. But that ball is not caught that often. And Drew Wolatarski, I mean, he stepped up and had a monster game. And while it's obvious we're here focusing on the defense and the defensive performance of the Blue Bombers, the receivers and the receiving group as a unit deserve a lot of credit because they stepped up their game in a big way. And the Bombers really needed it because that was one of the issues that they had in the close game against Calgary, going back to the loss against Toronto. Bomber drives were stalling out because of some slippery fingers. That was not the case. And I just thought from an offensive standpoint, the running game, the offensive line stepped up, but the receiving core really had arguably their best game of the season when they needed it the most.
Yeah, we're watching all week. Is Nick Dembski going to return? What kind of dimension can he add? And there he was on Sunday, catching a touchdown pass us. 3 catches, 41 yards, and a TD.
Speaking of perfect passes.
Yeah. Yeah, and, Kenny Lawler, I mean, he can get open deep and pretty much catch anything near him. So, it's amazing watching the Bombers offense operate this season and compared to last season, where, last season was very run heavy. You weren't exactly throwing it deep, a lot of safe throws. And this year, I mean, Collaros, he can make time, he can scramble, he can run if he needs to. He did get, banged up a bit early, and he managed to return and look fine. But, he can huck it up deep, and these guys can make plays and catch the ball. So, they signed Roosevelt. I don't know how he's going to fit in after all this. We'll wait and see this week at practice. But, Dembski came back look good. Lawler's having a breakout season. And Wolodarski, Darvin Adams. I mean, there's so many guys. Rasheed Bailey had 5 targets. They really spread the ball around so well. And, of course, Andrew Harris in the backfield. I mean, he can catch and, as you said, run and break tackles. And he definitely did that, to try to ice out the game at the end.
From a Riders perspective, a very frustrating day for Cody Fajardo. And I mean, you mentioned 2 individuals that we inevitably talk about when the Bombers are playing, Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat. The entire line and really defensive core, I thought, played. I mean, Adam Bighill had an amazing game. And man, not only did they, minimize the big plays for Saskatchewan, they made Cody Fajardo pay the price. I mean, a couple of huge hits, and credit to Fajardo for staying in that game. I mean, in different circumstances, different quarterbacks maybe don't make it back in after a couple of the hits that he took. But they were getting after him. They were getting hands on the football. Even when he was throwing the ball, he didn't have a lot of time to do it and was, doing it from less than ideal situations. And that was a big reason why the Bombers had 3 picks. And I saw our pal Nick Kowalski raving that Brandon Alexander might be the best safety in the league right now. He certainly stepped up with a massive game, aided by that pass rush, but 2 big picks, 3 in total for Cody Fajardo. Not what you would expect in the biggest game of the year at home for the favorite for the CFL MOP.
Yeah, and you're talking about Cody Fajardo and bad games. How about the end, the icing on the cake, hitting the upright crossbar? I know it wasn't exactly, to come back and tie. The game was kind of out of reach at that point, but I think he even said he just had a laugh about it. I think that's the appropriate way to look at it. But, I mean, I know Bombers fans howling that he hit. I mean, how often do guys hit the crossbar like that? Not too often. And to do that, as we said in the playoffs, last time these 2 teams faced off, and to do it again, just brought back really good memories.
Did it ever? I tweeted afterwards. I'm like, clang for old time's sake. I really, that was the moment of any moment of the entire weekend where I really wished I was in the stadium. Because I'm just imagining what the reaction of the Bomber fans after the clang on the goalpost was, considering what happened last year in the West Final. Huge win for the Bombers, though. I mean, they're back on top of the CFL power rankings, I'm sure. And it's very interesting. We're still waiting for Coolbet lines. I did see one of the other books open the Bombers as only a 2.5-point favorite at home in the Banjo Bowl, which, I don't know, seemed very strange considering what we saw on the weekend and the fact that, home teams routinely get 2 to 3 points just for being at home. But again, anything's possible. It is going to be a great, great weekend here in Winnipeg. Looking at the weather right now, looks like it's going to be sunny and about 21. Some perfect September football weather. So if you haven't already made plans to get to the Banjo Bowl, I would suggest you do. Going to be a great, great afternoon of football. We're going to spend a lot more time on the Bombers coming up with Jeff Hamilton in just a few minutes. We're also going to get ready for NFL Kickoff coming up with Zig Fracassi. I will tell you, Remis, with all of the great sports, and we'll touch on the Blue Jays run, and of course, what's happening with the National Hockey League and the Kotkaniemi moves. But the best thing I saw sporting-wise all weekend was the Bombers right up there. But Leila Annie Fernandez, this Canadian tennis phenom. Friday night, I watched the match against Naomi Osaka, the number 3 player in the world, down a set and down a break in the second set. This young woman has the, if you could bottle this sort of energy and sell it, you'd be a billionaire. The way she fought back in that match and won, and completely won the hearts of everybody in that stadium. And then did it again against her German opponent, Angelique Kerber, the 16 seed in the round of 16. And now, having just celebrated her 19th birthday yesterday, she'll be front and center today in the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open. And, you know, it was a tough loss last night for Bianca Andreescu, and a heck of a match for those of you that stayed up late enough to watch it. Went to like 1:30 in the morning. Denis Shapovalov had a rough weekend. Felix Auger-Aliassime is going to play later on in the quarterfinals. But honestly, to me, the story, if you were focusing on one thing in Canadian sports, you would have been well served to make sure you're watching Leila Annie Fernandez. And she's a big, big underdog, again, going up against the 5th seed Eva Svitolina this afternoon. But I'll tell you what, I mean, there's a lot that's been made of Bianca, Jeannie back in the day, Dennis and Felix in Canadian tennis. I think we've got a new Canadian tennis star in Leila Annie Fernandez, and she is absolutely a rock star right now at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I've been loving the U.S. Open. Friday night was so much fun watching her and watching Felix. I was planning on going to bed early last night. I'm like, oh, Bianca is playing. Oh, this is a pretty good match. They keep going to these tie breaks. Next thing I know, it's like 1:30 and the match is over, and she really gutted that one out. But Friday night, I watched it with my wife. And she was in tears after, so happy for her winning. You're right, the crowd got absolutely behind her. I mean, big upset over Osaka, who after the match said she's going to be taking some time off from playing tennis. But, I mean, she's such a great personality, Leila Annie Fernandez. So I'm excited to see how she performs tonight and the quarterfinals. So I love the U.S. Open. I mean, these late games.
Oh, it's the best.
Games at a reasonable, the primetime tennis. That, you know, means something is incredible. So I have been, and it's on all the TSN channels. I've been loving watching the U.S. Open this year so far.
I had to back Leila Annie at the window with a little plus 225 underdog bet. If it doesn't happen, the enjoyment I've had from her run so far will pay for that. But that match is going to be going this afternoon. We'll be keeping an eye on TSN to let you know how it goes. If you're listening to the podcast later, definitely check it out. She has been just a phenom, and it has been so much fun to watch. We'll get to the Blue Jays. We'll get to the hockey story a little bit later on. The Hammer's coming up next. Before we do that, I want to thank our newest sponsor, Manitoba Battery Distributors, over at 1026 Logan, for jumping on board with us. They are the battery guys for literally everything. We're getting into car season when it's getting cold, so we'll probably focus on the automotive deals they've got there. But industrial, farm, power sports, quads, Sea-Doos, sleds, UPS backup supplies, they've got it all. And here's the key thing. Often when you know, oh, I need a battery, you'll head down to a big box store like Costco. Manitoba Battery is going to get you the same battery at a better price, and they'll deliver it to you anywhere in the city. Find out more. Give Donnie and the gang a call at 783-8787. You can find them online at manitobabattery.com. And for September, they've got a special promo right now, and this is great for those of you that are putting some of the toys away for the summer, whether it's a summer car, a boat. It's a maintainer. $20 for your battery, essentially charges it throughout the winter. So when you get it out of the garage and get it ready next spring, you are good to go immediately. Find out more, Manitoba Battery, 783-8787, or check them out online at manitobabattery.com. Big shout out to our friends at Little Brown Jug. The limited edition Pride 1919 cans are on sale today. You can get those on the website, or you can get them out of the tap room on William Avenue. $1 from each can is going to Pride Winnipeg and Friends. And they actually have a big Pride patio party coming up at Little Brown Jug on Friday, September 10th, where people can bring donations to the Sunshine House. We know there'll be plenty of 1919s consumed in and around the Banjo Bowl, so make sure to stock up. You can get home delivery if you want. Go to littlebrownjug.ca and get that set up for the weekend. And Burger Week continues. And you can get $1 off pints in $19.19 when you try the Burger Week entries at Seba Waterfront Cafe, Block and Blade Restaurant, The Merchant Kitchen, and Saffron's. And a big shout out to our friends at Royal Sports. There will be plenty of blue and gold coming out of the store heading into the Banjo Bowl. If you need your Bomber gear, Jets gear, NFL gear for kickoff, they've got it all at Royal Sports. And of course, hockey season's here. They are the hockey superstore in the city of Winnipeg for over 35 years. Family owned. One stop for all your sporting needs. It's at Royal Sports, along with King Skate, Snow and Surf at 750 Pembina Highway. All right, it's hammer time back on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Jeff Hamilton back safe, sound, and in one piece, allegedly from Regina in the Labor Day Classic weekend. Looking pretty good today, Hammer. No worse for the wear. How was the weekend?
Living proof you can survive it. It was great, man. It was awesome. I mean, it was an awesome weekend in Regina. I know that sounds crazy to say, but it's true. The rest of the week of football games were great. I just think it was a tremendous weekend for the CFL and obviously for the Bombers, and particularly in Regina, where it was just gorgeous. And, for those who were cheering for the blue and gold, it was certainly a good wrap to an otherwise awesome weekend.
Hey, before we get to the game, what was it like around there? I mean, you've done this trip beforehand for the Free Press. I mean, you kind of know what it is about. Bombers fans, Rider fans, partying their asses off all weekend, having a great time. I was mentioning this to Remis. I mean, as someone that has taken part numerous times and not in a work part,
Capacity,
we're always
yes,
exactly, not working, off the clock. The Wayne's World Party is one of the highlights of everything. I saw a few pictures. It seemed like there were less Bomber fans this year. Was that just the way it looked, or just with everything going on, were there, from your perspective, maybe a few less representatives of the Bomber Nation out in Saskatchewan this weekend?
Way less. So way less in the sense that usually, we get there on Friday, leave Monday, and people usually make a weekend out of it, right? So some people show up Friday, spend a couple nights. Most people get there Saturday, kind of take over the city a little bit, if you will. And then obviously Sunday's game. But, of course, with COVID-19 being an issue, not just in the country, but particularly in Saskatchewan, where they seem to be lagging, if you will, in the vaccination situation. As many people know, they are getting a rule where you need to prove, or you just have to show a negative COVID test or be double vaccinated to attend games. But that doesn't kick in for, I think, another week or two. So a lot of Winnipeggers were hesitant to want to share a stadium with a bunch of people potentially who weren't vaccinated. I mean, we saw in the home opener, they had, I think, 8 cases, which is probably low. So I don't blame them. As someone who was there for the weekend, certainly feels different than it feels here. It's not in a good way, for sure. But so that led to it. I made me and Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun, I did a bit of an Instagram story all weekend for those who caught it. And the biggest difference for me was not once did I see someone wearing a Winnipeg Blue Bombers jersey whizzing into the fountain downtown where it says "I love Regina." So you knew it was a little bit of a pullback as far as like the crowd atmosphere. But at the game, I will say this: so didn't see many people. Did see some people with Winnipeg gear. I mean, there were people that showed up on a lot of people. I saw some people on Sunday, a bit on Saturday, but at the game there was a particular section of Winnipeg fans which I thought was awesome. You could hear the True North call during the anthem, and you could hear the blue part during the anthem as well. So, there was a presence, and I will say this, the Bombers certainly appreciated the players and everybody else in the organization. They mentioned it before the game, they can hear them. So to those who did make the trip, good on you. For those, don't blame you. Those who didn't, I don't blame you. But it was a bit of a different weekend, but at the same time, it was different in a good way for a lot of Bomber fans, and that the Bombers actually walked away with 2 points. So
yeah, well, as someone that has been to 10 Labor Day games and have a lifetime record of 1-9, I tell you what, the people that did make the trip were rewarded with one hell of a performance from the Winnipeg squad. It can't really start without talking about this defensive performance. I was going back from, other Labor Day games, certainly the Banjo Bowl. I guess in 2010, the Bombers allowed only 2 points. But, I mean, against a team that was undefeated, had the odds-on favorite for the MOP, a huge statement game from Willie Jefferson, Adam Bighill, Jeff Coate, Alexander, and the rest of that Bomber defense. They came up huge.
Absolutely. Keep going down the line. Mike Jones, Brandon Alexander, like you had a lot of individual performances, strong performances, but you had an overall collective great effort from the defense. And, anyone who's watched this team this year, they've been the show stealers in all the games, particularly the four victories this year that now have the Bombers at 4-1 and at the top of the CFL standings. But it was just, it's exactly, they came in there. I don't know if anyone saw Willie's comments, but they were awesome. He came out and said that this team I kind of couched him a little bit with the whole, if they really beat anyone special, and he just took the ball and ran with it and said, nope, this is a team that hadn't faced the smoke, and this is a team that, hadn't been tested, and Cody Fajardo was about to get tested, and we certainly saw that. I mean, we saw them dominate. It was obviously a close game through the first two quarters, 8-7 in favor of Regina or Saskatchewan. So, but that second half, I mean, they locked it down. This has been the story of this team kind of all season long, is they're a second half team. If you look at the stats, they've allowed 6 total points in the fourth quarter, and I think 23 total points, and again, total through those 5 games in the second half. So this is a team that shows up. They played well through those final 2 quarters, and the defense made plays, but had the key turnovers, forced Fajardo to get on the run, and he had no options. We know that Cody Fajardo doesn't test deep, and he didn't, or when he did, he got picked off, and it was just a bad night for him and the entire team because the Bombers defense took over once again.
Yeah. It really did seem like Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat in particular were dominant and involved right from the get-go. Was that where it started for you, Jeff? Because certainly, I mean, even on one of the picks for sure, you get a hand in on the football. I mean, we talk so much about controlling the line of scrimmage. We'll get to the Bomber offensive line and what they were able to do offensively as well on a couple of really key drives. But to me, right from the start, I mean, the guys at the front were hunting Cody Fajardo, and they made it uncomfortable for him pretty much every time he went back in the pocket.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's of course where it started with me. Even though that they were down by a point, the defense had only surrendered. They didn't even surrender a touchdown. And thanks to one of the commenters, I was kind of checking out the scene before. I guess that's 2 games in a row, including last year's playoff game where they haven't allowed a touchdown. So what an impressive feat for this defense. Obviously a bit different from 2019 to this season, but certainly started with them. And I mean, the reality is I got a bit of flack from some readers. I don't write headlines for my stories, but it said big upset, pull a big upset. And, maybe it wasn't an upset in the truest sense that the Bombers were, some bottom feeders and they came in and they beat some, incredibly talented Saskatchewan team. But you look at the history at Labor Day Classic. It was 14 losses in the last 15 games. It didn't matter. And if you look through those years, it doesn't matter where the teams are in the standings. There's one year, I forget exactly what year it was. I think the Riders were 0-8 or 0-9 come Labor Day, and they won and handedly. So, we know it's a tough environment to play in. I mean, the Bombers offense was practicing all week with sound and whatever. I mean, the defense doesn't have that crazy crowd noise that's affected with them, but Cody Fajardo and the Roughriders offense was averaging a league best 26.7 points a game, and they didn't even score a touchdown. They got 2 field goals and 2 singles. And so to me, I mean, anyone that watched that game would have looked at that defensive effort and said, and probably would have looked at it before the game and said they needed to show up. And to do so on a stage like that, and to do so and in the way that they did, and how dominating they were. And I agree with you. It starts with Willie Jefferson. I don't know if he recorded a sack per se. I think he had a tackle for loss, got his hand on a couple of things, but he's just wreaking havoc all game. Same thing with Jackson Jeffcoat, as you mentioned. He's blossomed. Hopefully he can stay healthy this season and really emerge into one of those top defensive ends in the league. And Adam Bighills, we were mentioning off camera before I came on here. He's a guy that I think he's returning to his 2018 form, where he was the defensive player of the year, and battled through injuries a bit through 2019. He's been a monster and has carried that linebackers crew that has seen injuries throughout. And then the secondary, I mean, Dietrich Nichols, I mean, that guy has played to an all-star caliber through 5 weeks. He's had, they've been picked apart in some ways, but secondaries get picked apart. There's not a single team that dominates in the secondary. So, just all in all, you look at this team and you look at the backbone. Andrew Harris called them that very thing. They're the backbone of this club. And so long as the offense can continue to improve and maybe see some, we're going to have to see some better stuff from the special teams. This is a really good club in what's going to be a unique year. And I mean, I know it's early, but the Bombers got to be favorites, or, at the very least contenders to win again this season.
Yeah, I'm sure when the Grey Cup odds get recalculated this week, the Bombers will be alone at the top after their performance on the weekend. Offensively, I was impressed with the running game, and I think this gets back to the offensive line, of course. And I'm not sure that they felt that they maybe didn't have their best game last weekend against Calgary, but they certainly knew that they were coming up against a top opponent and needed to establish themselves in that case. And early on, 7, 8, 12 yards on carries from Andrew Harris really made, kind of gave the plan ahead for the Bombers as to how they would win that football game. And in a tight game in that third quarter, they get the ball on the 23-yard line. Zach Collaros had some great passes, but once again, the running game, a huge part of, establishing an offensive attack that, you couldn't really focus on one side or the other of the football because of just how well Zach Collaros was distributing it and how effective Andrew Harris was when he was getting the ball in his mitts.
Yeah, I think, starting with the O-line, I think there was, I don't want to say there was feelings that they weren't getting the job done or that they were being underappreciated or whatnot. I know they weren't happy, with what their season had been, despite being, in a good position at 3-1 heading into the weekend, but certainly exerted their dominance here. I mean, when you look at some of the games across the league, you'll see running backs, get good yardage. I look at Edmonton, for instance, and I'm not trying to, beat up on their O-line, but Wilder's a pretty powerful guy. So, if he's able to get 2-3 yards because of the O-line, he becomes even more powerful. So that's not exactly the case there, but it is in Winnipeg. And with Andrew Harris, we've seen it for years. He's certainly benefited from an O-line that pushes the ball, right? It pushes up. And so when you're hitting that line of scrimmage, 1, 2, sometimes 3 yards ahead, you already got that gain. And we've always seen Andrew, if he can hit a gap, good luck to the linebacker. I mean, he'll drop down. He can usually either make a miss or he'll run straight through him. So I think the biggest thing about Andrew's game too, and I wrote about it in my 5 takeaways in the paper today, was that we're getting closer to seeing vintage Andrew Harris, and that was week 4 game against Calgary was he got that touchdown early. That helped him with his confidence, but we got closer to seeing what we kind of expect to see from 33 in Sunday's game. I mean, he ran passionately. He walked. I don't know if you saw it, but he walked across the Saskatchewan sidelines, looked over there a handful of times, stuff that he's kind of known to do when he's in the groove. And as you mentioned, Huss came up big at certain points. I mean, if you look at the second half, the Bombers took 2 costly penalties, pushed them out of field goal range. They're facing a 2nd and 23. Andrew gets a pass behind the line of scrimmage and scampers 17 yards to salvage 3 points. And if you had a chance to listen to head coach Mike O'Shea after the game, I asked him when he thought the turning point in the game was, and it was that drive in the third quarter that was, I think it was McGuire's second punch-in touchdown. Yeah. Well, Andrew had runs of 20 yards in that and 15 yards in that. So, he played it, he's not at that level where, he wants to be or necessarily what we expect him, but he got pretty damn close in that game. And that's a scary thought for the Bombers. If Andrew Harris can stay healthy and can continue to improve, this offense, ultimately catch up to what we're seeing from the defense.
Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. If you're with us in the YouTube, great to have you. Do us a favor, give us the thumbs up. We've got a nice number at 69 right now, but we could always use a few more. Speaking of the offense, I was somewhat critical, and I think fairly, that, the receivers had a couple games where there was just way too many drops, Jeff. I thought Collaros did a great job of moving the football around, targeting a number of different guys, and pretty much to a man, they stepped up with, grabbing difficult balls, contested balls, and, in an example like the Wolotarski grab that we've seen on SportsCenter over and over again, Collaros putting the ball in a spot where it could not get picked and having the receivers go and get it. And that, to me, from a receiving core group, the best game that they had all season long.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that too. I mean, think about the last, the narrative after the last 2 games was, as you mentioned, the drop passes, right? And then at least part of the narrative beyond the defense after Sunday's win was about the catches. Whether you want to talk about Jewel Wolotarski's, his diving catch, Kenny Lawler came up big. I mean, credit to Darvin Adams for, playing that play in the end zone hard that led to the, the defensive pass interference, which led to the punch-in touchdown from McGuire again. There were some big plays there, but I'll go right back to your earlier point about Zach Collaros. I mean, that guy's a gamer. He'll run the play. I mean, I hate to beat up on Matt Nichols, but could you imagine if they chose Matt? I mean, this loyal organization chose Matt over Zach. We wouldn't be talking the way we're talking right now. And the reality is, Nichols would throw the ball away. As soon as there was, as soon as he went through his reads, he'd throw the ball away. And Zach Collaros will not let a play die until it's dead. And that includes, extending plays with his feet, evading, would-be tacklers. I always look at his stats afterwards and I'm thinking, okay, he must have had like 60, 70 rushing yards, but he has like 27. But it was just because he's been running for 100 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And then, as you mentioned, puts the ball in position to get caught. I mean, you're not going to find a smoother pass to than the 27-yarder to Nick Dembski. I mean, that was Aaron Rodgers-esque. That's a catch where only he can catch. It's over his shoulder, and credit to Nick who caught that after a frustrating play earlier in the game that led to him not catching a ball. But it's just, he's the guy that this team needs. He's the future. I think we got a little bit of a scare there when he was limping and missed a play, and nothing against Sean McGuire, but he bobbled that one play, and then in came Zach Collaros, and you could tell there was a bit of a feeling of relief there for Bomber fans. And so, I mean, this guy's just, all those injuries talks, all the other stuff that that kind of went away with the Grey Cup run. I mean, it just continues to get strengthened behind this guy. And, it's going to be awesome to see what he can do for this organization, right now, obviously in the present and into the future.
You mentioned Dembski because he did have that play earlier that he certainly would want to have back. To me, that was pretty much the only, a blemish on the receiving core, and, was able to make up for it with that big touchdown later on. I'll say this though, Jeff, I think having Dembski in the lineup completely changes the running game as well. You saw them do a couple plays in the with Lawler in the Dembski spot, running through the backfield because it's part of the offense. Mm-hmm. But they didn't seem like Calgary had to respect it the same way that they do when Dembski's running through there because of how devastating that play and that formation has been before. And once Dembski was there and you're keeping an eye on it, it's almost like you have less guys to worry about the front and the guy that's probably getting the ball, Andrew Harris. And that paid big time dividends on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's just his versatility, where he's able to kind of add to that run game, obviously. I mean, you could make the argument that you added another weapon to the receiving game, so you have to respect the receiving game more, right? I mean, those two games when Nick was out, whether it was the drop balls or whatnot, I mean, those kill drives too, right? So when you're maintaining those, you're getting those passes, you're not dropping balls, you're moving the chains, you can then implement a playbook that is a lot wider than those when you constantly are going 2 and outs, as we've seen in some previous games. Nick is I think he's one of those guys that, not that we're kind of waiting for him to kind of pop off, but I don't know, he's a guy whose his name isn't new to the CFL, obviously, but, he's also known to kind of have a hot start and kind of cool down a little bit. But to see him kind of show up again after missing 2 games, I don't want to say necessarily it shows a level of maturity we haven't seen, because it kind of sounds like a dumb comment, but he's a guy that's, he's going to play a big role in this offense. He's going to play a big role in this team. He's confident, all those things you want out of a receiver. And when you have all those great traits and you actually execute them on the field, teams have to watch you. So, I mean, that's essentially what Calgary would do for all those years that they were a dynasty. They were adding up, marquee player after marquee player after marquee player. And it gets to a point where, you can't really, plan around 1 or 2 guys. You kind of have to plan around the whole thing. And I think maybe we're seeing that with the Bombers, and particularly when you add a guy like Nick Dembski, who was in the lineup the last 2 games, to the group, it's just going to add to that planning. And again, when it pays off, he's going to have more attention next week. We'll open up other room for other guys.
Amber, what do you think the special teams meeting is going to be like this week? I think both offensively and defensively, there were so many good things. I think we're generally positive about that. You've got a young kicker that has had some ups and downs so far this season. But to me, I think, they're missing Janarian Grant in the return game right now. And I would imagine if there's anything the coaching staff might nitpick, it might be on some kick coverage from from Sunday's game.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the area of a team that's kind of in question right now is special teams, for a team that's coached by Mike O'Shea, who has put a lot of respect, has a ton of respect for it, and all those things. Obviously, the absence of Justin Medlock, as we've talked on this show and others, is an issue. Mark Leggio has been okay at times. He obviously played well against Calgary, was able to hit that clutch shot in the last moments of the game and whatnot. But I keep thinking, coming down to like when it's the playoffs, right? Like when it's the playoffs and it's razor thin and everything's on the line, not just from a kicking perspective, but field position as well. And I mean, look, Mark Leggio could be the future. I just don't think he's the present when it comes to kicking field goals. And when you're a team trying to go back to back, you got to get your kicking game down. I mean, Justin Medlock was the bread and butter of this team. He allowed you to get to midfield and still leave with 3 points. That's not the case here. It's not even close to being the case. And Tyler Capina is not the answer. They have an American kicker coming in, Ali Mutara, Darda or whatever. I should have that name down, but I haven't seen him, haven't talked to him. He's been, I think he'll kind of be on the team this week. He'll probably make a push to be the kicker for week 6 in the rematch of the Banjo Bowl. We'll see about that. But, those are things that you need to address. It's great that you're 4-1, but you need to address the special teams and the kick game. Like, I mean, are you waiting for Janarian Grant? I mean, I'm not trying to beat up on, Charles Nelson here, but the guy's been on the team for parts of 3 seasons. And when he gets the ball in his hands, doesn't really do anything. And I mean, to be fair, he didn't get a kickoff return. So, there's that. But when you look around the league, I mean, it's such a huge, important part of the game to get good field position, as we saw with Saskatchewan, as you mentioned, kind of the coverage there. I mean, it was questionable at times. And the defense came up big. Imagine you have everything working for you from the Blue Bombers perspective, except for those areas. And it feels like those are areas that you can address. And then, whether that will change this week, I don't know. We'll see what happens with the tape and whatnot. But you just have to think that as the season goes on and the games become more important, in particular when we head into playoffs, those things need to be locked down. And just what we've seen through 5 weeks, they aren't.
So, Hammer, let's look ahead to Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Should be a wild scene at IG Field. Hopefully a full house, lots of blue, bit of green in the stands. What do you expect to see next weekend?
I expect to see a bit of an answer from Saskatchewan. They're a proud team. They're a team that, they care about, they're a good team too, even though the Bombers did lay the boots to them there in the second half. I think they understand that they're in a position to fight for top spot, and you never want to lose 2 games in a row, and you never want to lose to your rivalry. So I'm expecting a better effort from Saskatchewan for sure. But I also think the Bombers ride the momentum. I mean, I talked about this prior to the game and asked questions about it afterwards. The demeanor of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers heading into week 5 was much different than what I'd seen in the previous weeks. So it's not to say that the attitude or whatever was bad in the first few weeks and then better this past week. It reminded me a lot of what I saw in 2019 Grey Cup. Where it was all business, a lot of, not a bunch of, crazy quotes. Obviously, Willie went off a little bit there the day before, which was great, but a lot of, business, just straight business approach, very just determined. And even after the game, it was like, we didn't send anyone a message. We'll let you know. We'll let you know when we send a message after we sweep this home and home series. So the focus for the Bombers has been and will continue to be these 2 games rather than that last one. So I think the Bombers are the obvious favorites. I think you mentioned they were at, I think, -2.5. That's probably disrespectful compared to what we saw last week. But at the same time, it's always a battle between these 2 teams, and 2 sides that have 2 very, good group of coaches, and they're going to come at it. So I'm expecting a hard physical game. I don't know if for those who watched it, I mean, that was probably the most physical game all season. Lots of trash talk in there too a little bit, but just a hard, physical, violent game. So I'm expecting the rematch to just kind of maybe even potentially take another level. So, buckle up. Should be a good time.
Can't wait. I imagine you'll be getting us ready all week in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press.
Yeah, well, I got a couple days off here, but I'll be back at it on Thursday or Friday, getting ready to tee up that game. So stay tuned. And like I said, it should be a classic.
Hammer, great stuff. Thanks for doing this. Impressed that you look as good as you do after the meat grinder that is Labor Day weekend in Regina, but you're a professional, pal. Keep up the great work.
You know how it is, early bedtimes. Just get the words in. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having me on, Huss. Always a pleasure, and shout out to the comments. You guys are the ones that drive this. So
right on. We'll do it again soon, pal. Thanks so much. There he is, Jeff Hamilton, at Jeff K. Hamilton on Twitter. Some great stuff coming out of the weekend. You read his column at the Winnipeg Free Press, and we'll get ready for the Banjo Bowl. All right, we're going to talk some NFL in just a sec. But before we do, I told you that we were going to do something special for Banjo Bowl week, and our friends at Canadian Club, our sponsors in the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, are back. And we've had some great I Love Rye packages, but this one, folks, we're going to the top shelf this week for our Bomber Canadian Club giveaway. You see this, folks? This is the special edition Canadian Club Chronicles 42-year-old whiskey. Check out this beauty. Look at this. Look at the beautiful packaging. Look at this. We'll pop this sucker out. It's art. Wouldn't even want to drink it, but we could. This, I believe this bottle is pushing about $3, folks. But one of our lucky listeners and followers is going to win this on Friday on the program. How, you may ask? Well, what you need to do is follow our socials at Sports Talk WPG on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We'll have a post on each format. Your retweet, make sure you're following us on the YouTube channel or subscribing to the YouTube channel. We'll pick 10 people from each Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'll put them in for a very special Banjo Bowl marble race for the Canadian Club 12-Year Chronicles coming up on Friday. So there you have it. We'll post these after the show today. We'll pick our winners, the contestants, shall we say, Thursday night. And then on Friday, we'll fire up the marbles again at the end of the program and get somebody this incredible Canadian Club Chronicles 42-year-old whiskey as part of our package for the Banjo Bowl. Big shout out to our friends at Knott Auto Corp. Actually, Chris Abbott, Coolbet Chris, and I are going to be going with the Knott gang to the game on Saturday. Going to be great. Trevor and Knott Auto Corp, great supporters of the Bombers for a long time. And helping a lot of people get into great vehicles over at Knott Auto Corp. If you're thinking about an upgrade or a new whip before you do anything, go see the experts at Knott. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Knott team? See them at Waverly and McGillivray, or you can see them online at knott.ca. And we may have to get DQ Nick on the program at some point this week because he is doing an absolutely incredible job of trying just about every burger in Burger Week. I personally love his burger, the ultimate grill burger over at Dairy Queen. We know when we're talking DQ, we're talking ice cream, all the great Blizzard flavors. It sort of is what summer is all about. But as we get into the fall, they're going 12 months a year. And of course, you can also get those great DQ cakes. Follow them on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. Fire them a note. They'll get you set up and you can just pop by and pick up at any of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs, DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, or the DQ over on St. Anne's. All right. We are 2 days away from NFL Kickoff. Did my final fantasy draft last night, and I am ready to go. And few people we enjoy talking more about anything to do with the National Football League than Zig Fracassi. But with 2 days away from the Buccaneers defending their Super Bowl championship in prime time against the Cowboys, we thought this was a perfect time to bring Zig in. What's going on, Zig? Great to have you on the program again.
Andrew, good to be with you, my friend, in that Canadian Club. I'll salute to that.
Absolutely. A little far away for me to pour you one, but next time you're in Winnipeg, we'll definitely have a few CCs for you, Zig. Hey, absolutely. Before we get to the NFL, did you catch any of the big Labor Day weekend in the Canadian Football League? I know you pay attention to the what's going on in the 3-down game north of the border when you can.
Yeah, I did. I saw a little bit of the Toronto-Hamilton game, and I love the back and forth between, the Ticats and the Argos on Twitter and all that. Well, they hadn't won. Toronto hadn't won, and then Toronto argues back, well, you haven't won a Grey Cup since whenever it was. So I thought that was great. And then Edmonton, I thought, looked very, very good against Calgary yesterday. So I did catch a little bit of the games on Labor Day.
Yes, well, the Bombers thumped their rivals to the west, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and we've got a rematch here in the Banjo Bowl coming up on Saturday. And to me, this might be, from a football fan here in Winnipeg that loves the Canadian Football League and loves the NFL, this might be one of my favorite weeks of the year, Zig. We've got the opening game on Thursday. We've got a big game here in Winnipeg on Saturday with the Banjo Bowl, and then the first full slate of games in a 17-game season right now. The wait is over, and we're good to go. Let me start off with the champs. They deserve it. They're hosting the game on Thursday night. Tampa Bay's bringing back all 22 starters from that Super Bowl team. I mean, that's pretty much unheard of. Are the Bucs the team to beat going into the season, Zig?
I don't know why they shouldn't be. Like you just mentioned, everybody's back. And obviously, as long as number 12 has his insatiable hunger to continue to succeed, I don't know why they wouldn't be considered the favorite. Now, of course, a lot went well for them last year. Obviously, they had relatively good health. They did close the season with 4 straight wins against, not exactly the 70s Cowboys or Steelers. So they had a kind of a weak schedule. But when it mattered most, Andrew, they got hot. They won those. How about that? They won the 3 road games to get a true home game in the Super Bowl. That's the first time that's ever happened. So, again, though, with teams that are trying to repeat, which ironically was the last time Brady's Patriots teams did in the early 2000s. They were the last ones to repeat. Do they have health going their way? A lot of people singing Kumbaya right now, but, they at some point when things start to go a little bad, if they do, they're going to pull apart. So those are things I think that you would say for any defending champion to watch over. So that'll be interesting. But again, at least in that division, New Orleans, I think, a touch weaker. Atlanta and Carolina still on the rebuild. So from anything, they should be able to dominate that division. Again, we'll see over time whether they're able to continue to play well in the NFC.
Well, Zig, let's stay in the South for a minute. You mentioned the New Orleans Saints. A huge changing of the guard with Drew Brees, their Hall of Fame quarterback, retiring at the end of last season. And Jameis Winston is going to be the guy. And, if this turns out well for Jameis, I think taking a $2 million season to learn and play behind Drew Brees last year will be one of the more brilliant contractual moves we've seen in NFL history. Obviously, remains to be seen if he can do that. But I'll tell you what, Sean Payton, with the amount of turnover, not having Brees, Michael Thomas injured for the first 6 weeks, and now the challenges of moving their home opener to Jacksonville, they're dealing with a lot going into this week 1, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, we talked about this on our show over the weekend. The fact that they had to relocate everybody from New Orleans to Dallas in such a short period of time. And think about this too, Andrew. This was just before the final cuts. So can you imagine bringing, 30 extra guys with you and then just telling them, oh, by the way, you're not going to be able to play for the Saints this year. So very interesting dynamic. But I think, as usual, the Saints organization with Mickey Loomis, Mrs. Benson, handled that extremely well. Now, I guess I saw a weather forecast that maybe some inclement weather, let's call it, maybe hitting the Jacksonville area this weekend. So that's something to worth watch. But to the Saints themselves, don't forget, too, Onyemata, the outstanding defensive tackle, he was suspended too, Andrew, so they're not going to have him. You still have the issue there about Marshawn Lattimore, the starting corner, whether he's going to be able to play at least long term because of the incident apparently that happened in his hometown in Cleveland over the summer. And then you mentioned, obviously, about Jameis Winston. And I got to tell you something. I've been impressed with that young man. I remember I went down to their training camp, the Bucs training camp, the first year he was in the league. And even then, there was this perception, he had his issues at Florida State and all this and that, but he was always so polite and understanding. I think now, relegating himself to sit behind a Hall of Famer and, humbling yourself to do that, Andrew, I think that says a lot about him. For the first time in his career, he was in a situation where he didn't have to be the man, didn't have to be the franchise quarterback. So I think that and a work on mechanics. If you saw him play throughout the preseason, that ball got out there like a howitzer, and there was no hitch in the delivery. And I'm one of these guys that's really big when you watch the quarterback step and throw and eliminate the hitch, because if you do that, then that ball gets to that receiver a lot quicker. And his attitude, very, very good. I'm hoping, like heck, Jameis Winston has a whole lot of successes this year. And I'm not sure it was really a true quarterback competition there, because I don't see Taysom Hill being this, 3-down quarterback. He's more of a gadget guy. But anyway, they said it was a competition. I hope Jameis Winston does well this year in New Orleans.
Just before we leave the division, won't spend too much on Atlanta. I think they're sort of a work in progress. Exciting to see what Kyle Pitts can do as the number 4 overall pick. What about the Panthers, though? I mean, this is a team that I think they've got some real playmakers on defense. They've got Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson. They have guys that can make things happen, but the quarterback position has been a big question. And enter Sam Darnold for Act 2 of his career. I mean, he's still a very, very young quarterback, Zig. Matt Rule, the former Baylor coach, I think is a pretty brilliant offensive mind. Is this a perfect spot for Sam Darnold to sort of reinvigorate his career that sort of went south under Adam Gase in New York?
Yeah, I would say so, because let's face it, I mean, Charlotte's a fine city, a wonderful city, but it doesn't have sort of the blowtorch mentality that you play in the New York area. And obviously, there were a lot of things I thought that went against Sam, at least this past year. The offensive line, sans Mekhi Becton, wasn't very good. They really didn't have a whole lot of targets to throw to either. But at times, Sam does tend to get the happy feet, get sloppy with the mechanics. Again, I'm big on that. So I think now was the time for him to move on. And like you mentioned, Robbie Anderson, a guy he worked with the Jets. And I think, obviously McCaffrey, if he's healthy, they've got a chance to do some good things, and maybe takes a little pressure off McCaffrey there in the backfield too. I think their defense is definitely on the ascend. Matt Rule building this program like you would as a college program. And that's where I think David Tepper, the owner, had the foresight to give Matt Rule the long-term contract, which basically says, we're in this for the long term. You're going to do what you need to do to develop the program, so to speak. So I don't know if I see Carolina contending for the Super Bowl this year, but if Darnold's semblance better of what they've gotten at the quarterback position, and like I mentioned with that defense coming around, I could see them hovering at around 500, clear mark of progress this year. And they were actually playing pretty good before all the injuries happened last year.
Zig Fracassi of Sirius XM NFL Radio getting us ready for NFL Kickoff. Thursday night, it's the Cowboys and the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers. Speaking of the Cowboys, they had a rough season last year, and it all sort of, fell apart when Dak Prescott got hurt. Offensively, they have weapons that can hang with everybody else in the league. Is their defense good enough, and can they be the team that wins that NFC East, or will Ron Rivera's Washington football team ride that defense to a division title?
The way it went last year, in spite of all the injuries and a clearly god-awful defense, they were in the final game, Andrew. They could have won the NFC least last year. That's how frightening that is if you're thinking about it from that perspective. Now, having said that, Dak, obviously, the shoulder was a big concern throughout the offseason, but apparently the last few days he's been flinging it with no problem. We had Calvin Watkins on my show the other day from the Dallas Morning News. He said from what he saw, Dak was throwing the ball 30, 40 yards in the air with a lot of zip. So if you're a Cowboys fan, you got to be encouraged by that. You also got to be encouraged the fact that the O-line is relatively healthy, although Zach Martin, the outstanding guard, is going to miss the opener because of COVID-19, even though he's fully vaccinated, because he doesn't have enough time from the 5-day turnaround to be able to play. So that's a concern. But they've got the skilled people, and I think Ezekiel Elliott's in really good shape, maybe the best shape of his career, and I think he wants to atone from last year. I think what happened with him was once Dak went down, he tried to do too much. That's where the fumbles started. That's where some of the breakdowns started. So I think he's refocused. But as you mentioned, Andrew, the key is going to be this defense. And anything, even an iota of better play from that side portends well for them. Micah Parsons is a game breaker. This kid can can play end. He can drop into coverage. In fact, I was reading Michael Gelkin's piece of the Dallas Morning News today. He harkens him to a chess player. He plans moves ahead of time. The guy's very cerebral, and it's a lot of pressure to be putting on a young man, 11th overall pick at that age. But if he's the game breaker that they have, the Cowboys defense will be markedly better. They obviously drafted the first 6 guys of their draft last year to play the defensive side of the ball. If they get any semblance of a pass rush, Gallimore is going to miss the first couple of games. That hurts them in terms of the interior defense. but they've also added Keanu Neal, Malik Hooker, a couple of accomplished former first-round picks who've been injured, but they give leadership and direction. If they're any better than all, I think they win the East. You mentioned Washington. Tell you what, I think they've got a playoff caliber defense, especially with that front four. They're overall solid, Andrew, but to me, it's going to be the quarterback spot. And Ryan Fitzpatrick's been this great story throughout the years, but at some point, he's going to have a game where he throws 3 or 4 interceptions, and people are going to start clamoring for Taylor Heineke, who played very well in that wild card playoff game against Tampa last year. So Giants are still a little bit of a piece of work. How much is Barkley going to be ready to go full bore for the opener? Philadelphia looks like pretty much a complete rebuild job. So to me, it's probably Dallas and Washington for the NFC East this year.
Zig, what's the word on the Vikings? Unfortunately, for many of us watching the Vikings, the biggest story out of training camp has been COVID and players not vaxxed and frustrated head coach. Still a lot of talent in that club, though, but needless to say, with Aaron Rodgers back, Green Bay still is setting the bar in the NFC North.
Yeah, absolutely so. And, Cousins has made his bones known, if you will, about the vaccine, and that still remains a controversial point. With the Vikings, obviously, they totally redid their defense last year, massive departures from the prior year, so you're hoping that they're able to tighten things up on that side of the ball. To me, Dalvin Cook's got to be the guy. If he stays healthy, then I think they stand a puncher's chance, and they can't have a drop-off from Justin Jefferson because he was so outstanding last year. But just in terms of that division, you got the Rodgers dynamic, this whole fiasco that was in the offseason. I'm getting the sense, Andrew, that it's one of those, they win the Super Bowl or not, and that Aaron's out the door after this year. I honestly believe that. I don't know if that rift with Brian Gutekunst, the GM, can be totally fixed. It wouldn't shock me if Aaron Rodgers, if he plays next year, would be on a new team. That wouldn't shock me at all. But in that division, again, Detroit's in a rebuild, new coach, new quarterback, new GM. Chicago, do they go with Dalton long-term, or is Fields going to get in there this year? To me, it's the Packers division to lose.
All right, Zig, let's hit the AFC. I'll ask you about the Chiefs and the top contenders in a minute, but we were speaking about Tom Brady. Of course, maybe the biggest story of the last couple of weeks from the other side of the league has been Cam Newton getting cut in New England and Mac Jones getting the keys to the ride. Is he ready to do it? And what are your thoughts on the Patriots getting back to playoff contention with a rookie QB?
I think it's entirely possible. They spent a boatload of money on free agency in terms of receivers, in terms of tight ends. You got Dante Hightower, who's the unquestioned leader of that defense, along with Devin McCourty. Hightower coming back from the COVID hiatus. I think of the old Parcells line, Andrew, in terms of let's hold off on the anointing oils, because everything that you're hearing out of Foxborough is that, Mac Jones is the next Tom Brady. He's this, he's that. He may very well be. Cerebral kid, national champion, played at Bama, obviously coached by Saban. Saban and Belichick are very close friends. We get all the dynamic, but let's let the guy play a couple of games first. Although it was interesting to hear, I think it was Rob Ninkovich, the former Patriots linebacker, made the comment that it was Mac Jones helping Cam Newton with the playbook. Now, I'm thinking, my gosh, here's a guy who's been, an MVP in this league, 10-year veteran. Cam should be helping Mac with the playbook. But apparently it was the other way turned around. So, and Belichick took the high road and saying, hey, Cam gave us all that he did. But I think in the end, maybe the COVID thing with Cam, a little bit of a distraction. Of course, you're never going to hear that from Belichick. But I think in the end, Mac Jones has the demeanor and the look of a guy that could somewhat be Brady-esque. But let's let him play a few games first. Although, make no mistake, they were competitive in a lot of games last year. Cam doesn't lay the ball down late in the game at Buffalo. They win that one. They gas pipe a game in Seattle, a game that they should have had. You had those couple wins, they could have been in the playoffs. I think with the ads in the free agency, and again with Mac Jones being on board and knowing the system, I think the Patriots will be knocking at that door again. Are they better than Buffalo? I'm not sure about that, but don't be shocked if the Patriots do at least get a wild card spot.
You got a rookie QB in New England. You got a rookie QB when Zach Wilson with the Jets. And then there's Tua in Miami. And I think if you remove the quarterbacks, you could make an argument that, the Dolphins, personnel-wise, can hang with the rest of the division. How much pressure is going to be on Tua going into this season to get the job done for Brian Flores?
I think there's a fair amount, but I would also say this. They've also, added a lot of personnel that would aid Tua in terms of helping his development. A lot of people thought that the way Flores handled that quarterback situation wasn't very good. I'm one of the few that actually loves what he did. What he did last year was get that top pick. I liken this, Andrew, to a swimming lesson. You're going to start out in the shallow end a little bit, okay? And then once you think that person's mastered the shallow end, maybe you start going a little bit towards the middle part. And then if that happens, at least let them try to swim in the deep end. So I would say, akin to that, Tua wound up making it to the middle part of the pool. Now, this year, he's going to have to be able to swim, if you will, to make that step up next. They did win 10 games. They resolved the Xavier Howard contract situation. I think their defense is very good. Running game still a little suspect, even though Gaskin's back there. But from what I've read in that, Tua's been able to get the ball out a lot quicker. He's more into a rhythm. I think the Dolphins catered to him in terms of adjusting that offense. Tua's never going to have the rocket arm, but you could succeed and not have to throw the ball 50 yards in the air all the time. I'm encouraged. I love his demeanor. I love his faith. Hopefully that translates into success for the Miami Dolphins.
Zig Fracassi of Sirius XM NFL Radio with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk, getting ready for NFL Kickoff in Week 1 this week. Zig, last one for you. The Chiefs are back-to-back AFC champs. They're smarting over what happened in the Super Bowl. They rebuilt the offensive line. They are, once again, the favorite to win the AFC. Who are the teams that you think will be the biggest challenge to Andy Reid's squad in making it 3 AFC titles in a row?
Yeah, just a quick thought on that observation, Andrew. Yeah, in fact, the whole left side and the center are going to be brand new, so let's see how they assimilate really quick. And glad to have the doctor back, too, LDT, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. Contenders, obviously, Buffalo is right there. The way that they've built that organization, I think they're ready to take that next step. But to do that, you've got to beat said Kansas City, who's still the big dogs on the block. I think you're going to find out the opening week what the Cleveland Browns have. They go back to Kansas City. Remember last year, Browns gave them a scare after Mahomes went out in that playoff game. They were a couple of plays away from knocking the Chiefs off in that game. So I think Cleveland, if OBJ buys into the offense, and obviously if Clowney can complement Myles Garrett on the other side, I think Cleveland presents some big-time issues. And then in the South, if the Colts get anything semblance of quarterback play from Carson Wentz, I like their defense. I think they could be a factor. Tennessee has got to tighten things up defensively. And then out west, that's still the Chiefs' domain. Raiders and the other two teams, I think, are a ways away. So to me, it'd probably be Buffalo and Cleveland. Although I want to say Pittsburgh, never want to count Roethlisberger out, but a new offensive line, new philosophy, and this TJ Watt drama with the contract. I'm not sure I'd quite put them quite in that contender status, but so probably Buffalo and Cleveland, I think, would challenge Kansas City.
Zig, it is a pleasure having you on the program. I cannot wait to fill our lineups, make a few bets on the weekend, and get things going with another season of NFL football. Much appreciated. We'll do this again soon, and you be well, my friend.
Thank you, Andrew. Always good to be with you and yours.
Good stuff. There he is, Zig Fracassi. Follow him on Twitter, @Zig Fracassi, and check out all of Zig's great work on Sirius XM NFL Radio. All right, we've got to talk some off-season hockey. We'll tell you about the tennis. I can tell you right now that our Canadian, the lone Canadian woman remaining in the draw, Leila Annie Fernandez, is on court right now. The game's on, I think we're watching on TSN 3 here. She's up 2-1 in the first set. We'll keep an eye on this match throughout the afternoon here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Burger Week continues. And, well, we may have to get a couple of these burgers in us before we head down to Boston Pizza City Place on Friday night. I'll tell you about that in a second. But there are 3 Burger Week options at 3 different Boston pizzas right now for the remainder of the week. The C's Burger, which is the ultimate kitchen and bar collab. Boston Pizza's signature Caesar cocktail meets a burger. That one is available at BP Keniston. I got to get into this one. The jalapeno mac and cheeseburger is at Boston Pizza Taylor. Comfort food with a kick. And that one has got prosciutto on it, lettuce, tomato, onions, topped with the jalapeno and bacon spiked mac and cheese on a garlic buttered brioche bun. Man, that sounds amazing. And the bourbon barbecue bacon burger finished with a Cool Ranch drizzle available at Boston Pizza Henderson. So get into your favorite burger at any of those 3 Boston pizzas. And don't forget a little Winnipeg Sports Talk Lock Shop meetup Friday night with our old friends at Boston Pizza City Place. Dustin Nielsen's in town for the Banjo Bowl. Chris Abbott's coming in for it. We'll get the gang together. We'll do a live taping of the Lock Shop for NFL Week 1 over at Boston Pizza. Come on down, join us, have some pizza, wings, a few cold ones, and get ready for all the Banjo Bowl festivities the next day. And of course, we've got a couple weeks left of live racing at Assiniboia Downs. They go to the post tonight at 7:30. ASD Live, 6:45 with Kirk and Stretch, filling you in on everything that you need to know. Far better than our picks, which we will get to a little later on in the program. Michael Remis and I. Don't forget, VLT's opening once again, 9 till 12:15. And the Terrace Dining Room is open as well. But you do need to have reservations based on the current public health order. You can find out all the information at asdowns.com. Tonight and tomorrow, and then one more week of live racing next week. Make a point of getting out to the track. Going to be beautiful weather this week. Great time to take in the live racing before the season is over. And as always, you can bet from your home on hpibet.com. We'll make our hpibet.com picks a little bit later in the program. We'll also get to our cool bet lines a little bit later on. Let's get Michael Remis back in here as we continue the program. Great stuff with our guest today, Jeff Hamilton and Zig Fracassi. This is a great time for football fans, Reem, especially if you're a Bomber fan coming off that big win on Sunday, excited for the Banjo Bowl, maybe going out a little late and then being horizontal for 11 hours of NFL football for week 1 on Sunday.
Oh, yeah, I'm starting to get fired up. I got to starting to get ready for NFL DraftKings. You know, talking about Mac Jones, 4,400 this week on DraftKings.
I saw you pop that into the chat.
Yeah, that's something to think about for sure. And yeah, CFL. So this is a great time of year. It was funny talking with Joe. One thing we didn't mention about the game, Willie Jefferson on TV at the end. He made some kid take his shirt off. They take off his Rider jersey and then gave him his gloves. Is that what happened?
That is exactly what happened. First, he was getting the kids, these young Rider fans, to do the W, like Willie, of course, did. Great gift, by the way, available. That's from Winnipeg Sports Talk. And then with the camera there, got the kid to take the jersey off. Was he essentially renouncing Rider Nation? Can you imagine his parents seeing that kid? What sort of a young man have we raised? Taking off his Rider jersey because Willie Jefferson told him to.
Yeah.
That was almost the icing on the cake. Like, part of me almost felt a little bad. Like, whoa, geez, that's a tough look in Mosaic Stadium. Bombers go in, roll over the Riders, and then the young Rider fans are taking their jerseys off and taking gloves and joining the Blue Crew of Regina.
Imagine going to school this week, being the kid who took off your Rider jersey. I guess it's probably pretty sweet to get Willie Jefferson's gloves, but I mean, it was a pretty funny moment. Also, Andrew Harris went to give Sarah Orleski the high five on the sideline, and she was not having any of that. She would not.
Was that Sarah?
I think it was Sarah. Farhand, I thought we could only see her back, so I thought it was Sarah on the sideline. And then Farhand tweeted, "Did Sarah just leave Andrew Harris hanging?" And I think that was pretty funny. And then, the moment of the game we haven't even talked about as well, Huss. At the end of the first half, the roughing the kicker penalty, where every single person on Twitter and in the press box, any person anywhere was like, "What the hell is this? What is this call?" I'm shocked that got overturned. Usually calls like that just stays like, too bad. But that was one call that everyone was just like, what the H was that?
Now, and of course, that came right after the Bombers challenge, they roughing the passer when the guy obviously made contact with Zach Collaros' face mask and pulled it a little bit. I mean, it was not the most egregious penalty, and I think they did the right thing and not tacking the 15 yards on. But then for that to happen right afterwards in the fashion that it did was crazy. And yes, everyone except one person thought that was a great call and a good overturn. And that, of course, is our pal Gregory Liverpool. And Gregory, Gregory did have somebody that tweeted out that technically by the rule, the kicker cannot be hit behind the line of scrimmage. So while, yes, he was running forward, he was still behind the line of scrimmage. I don't know. At some point, there's some nuances in the rules. I don't think anyone in their right mind thought that should have been a 15-yard penalty. And that could have been a absolutely huge turnaround when it comes to the game, considering, the time, where it was, and what that meant at the end of the second half. Yeah, there were some weird calls throughout the Canadian Football League. I mean, the Calgary touchdown that came off the board on that phantom offside was probably pretty tough to take. But again, the story was not about the officiating Sunday afternoon in Regina. It was about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers putting a beating on the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And I'm sort of with Jeff. I really do expect the Riders to be much better. And I think this will be a close, tight game coming up on the weekend, which is part of the reason why I was so stunned that the line came out, initially at 2.5 for the Bombers. And that I was expecting we would see probably in the 5 to 6 range. Basically, the same line we saw for Saskatchewan being favored at home, flipping the page over to Winnipeg. Not that the line means much when we've seen these Banjo Bowl rematches in the past, because we do know you can pretty much throw the records out for both of these games. We've seen teams that are 1-7 beat 7-1 teams. That year, they won them both, of course, 2011. So it's going to be a game. There's going to be, I don't think anyone should be taking anything for granted. And the Bombers are going to be practicing this week knowing that they are going to be getting a pissed off Rider team that wants to acquit themselves much better on Saturday than they did at their home stadium last weekend.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know when the line came out last week, we were kind of confused. We thought the Bombers, were a better team than the Riders and, good enough to not only cover the line, but win outright. So if anyone did bet on that, and I think we were also on the Montreal line very early last week. It didn't work out for us 2 weeks ago against Calgary when Bo Levi didn't play, but last week it worked out well. And I know Mo Khan was on here saying Vernon Adams Jr. has become a game manager, not a game breaker, but it didn't stop me from riding him to first place in our DraftKings pool. So
yeah, I guess some congratulations.
Yeah, give myself a pat on the back.
Thrown out the Barry Horowitz for Michael Remis because you dominated. I mean, you had Vernon Adams, and who were the two Montreal receivers that you had?
Had Jake Winicky, who's had a breakout season for them, catching touchdowns, and Eugene Lewis, who's like one of the more underrated receivers. He's very consistent. So lucky have those guys who caught touchdown passes from Vernon Adams Jr. So those guys propelled me to the win in our DraftKings League. And the invites are out for this week's CFL, and we'll have NFL. I'll probably do it tomorrow, NFL.
Yeah, let's get that CFL contest filled up, and then our first NFL contest of the season will go. We'll probably throw it out tomorrow. Make sure you get those spots. Just get your spot reserved, because especially for the NFL, once it fills, and we won't be doing a second one. We'll probably go to 50 for the NFL for the first week of the season. I know everybody is all fired up for that. Well, listen, while we mention that, let's get to the lines for Coolbet. And don't forget Cool Bet Chris coming into town on Friday for our live lock shop, 7 p.m. Boston Pizza City Place on Friday night. Hope you'll come and hang out with us. We do have Cool Bet CFL lines. Hamilton, 3.5-point favorites on the road at the Toronto Argonauts, a total of 44.5. The Riders, 3-point underdogs at Winnipeg. I'll tell you right now, I think this number is going to go up. This number is going to be 4 or 4.5 by a game time, I would say. And we saw that exact same thing happen last week with Saskatchewan. I mean, that game opened at 2.5 or 3. It got up to, 6, Reem, on Thursday, and we said, now's the time to get it. It's definitely not getting any higher than this. And, of course, the money line was what sort of fluctuated. I got the money line for the Bombers at plus 180, and that was, I think, about as good of a line as it was. The 6 points was the time to get it. It ended up closing at 5. But, again, if you're on the Bombers side, it didn't matter if it was 5 or 6 or 4 or money line. You were cashing your ticket. So Bombers right now, 3-point favorites at home. The total, an incredibly low total of 40.5 points. You have to think we'll see some more scoring than we did last week in that 31-point total. Calgary at Edmonton. Edmonton, 1.5-point favorites. I'm surprised that this isn't closer to 3, Reem. I mean, when you think about the number that the Elks, did on Calgary yesterday in their Labor Day Classic, the rematch, some legitimate practice, having just seen this team, I thought that there might be a little bit more of a reaction to what it is. But I guess the big question is, could Bo Levi Mitchell make a return after their loss yesterday? This is a very big game. They've got one win on the season. You lose back-to-back against Edmonton, and just trying to figure out how they would make the playoffs with Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and Edmonton all ahead of them, not to mention BC in that mix. It's sort of getting cloudy if they do lose this game.
Yeah, that was a big win for Edmonton yesterday. Trevor Harris kind of looked like what we've expected for him. I think he threw for close to 400 yards. Worked it to a number of receivers. Calgary's pass defense has had some question marks. Jake Mayer, he was very solid in his first couple games, but he's still rookie. Although he looks good with some of those receivers, Markeith Ambles, Kamar, Jordan Joshoff. I like those guys, but the Elks, that was great showing for them after the week off. And yeah, Trevor Harris, 4 touchdowns and almost 398 yards. So watch over Edmonton. They couldn't score. They got a lot of yards the first couple weeks, but they couldn't score, and they finally found their way into the end zone multiple times yesterday. And yeah, 1.5 favorite. I would probably lean Edmonton as Calgary. They're at home, and Calgary they have one win. My bad.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep an eye on the quarterback, though. But, if you want to get early on it, because it might go up, go with 1.5.
Yeah, Calgary, even money on the money line. Edmonton, minus 122. And then we've got Ottawa getting 7 points, traveling all the way to the West Coast to take on the BC Lions. And it is looking like all the projections of it being a very long season for Lapo, Matt Nichols, and the Ottawa Redblacks are coming to fruition. But what's interesting is that Dominic Davis is now taking the first team reps for Ottawa. And, I kind of mentioned last week, I don't know if he's the answer, but it was pretty clear so far this season, at least, that Matt Nichols hasn't been the answer. And the bottom line is they just can't score any points right now. A big opportunity for BC to get going after a week off.
Yeah, it was their first receiving touchdown of the season came in week 5. So not a good look for Ottawa. They went with Dom Davis. That's in garbage time. He was great. Threw for 291 yards, 2 touchdowns, but it was the Dom Davis you remember with the 2 picks as well. And yeah, I agree. He even chipped in rushing. So in garbage time, decent fantasy line, to be honest, for Dom Davis. But we know what he is. He used to be the Bombers' backup. He's not he's not a guy who's going to lead you very far. So we'll see how it goes. But Matt Nichols clearly wasn't getting it done. It was time for a change, and you wish him the best. But there they are, 7-point underdogs after getting absolutely roasted by Vernon Adams Jr., whom Mo Khan was on here last week saying he was not a game breaker, but a game manager. Definitely looked like a game breaker against Ottawa.
Updated Grey Cup odds: Bombers are the favorites, plus 350. Riders plus 375. Ticats after their wins back up to plus 425. And then it's really, there's 3 teams and then everybody else. Montreal and Toronto at 8-1, 8 plus 850 for BC, 10-1 Edmonton, 13-1 Calgary, and 25-1 for Ottawa. That may as well be 250-1 because I don't think the Red Blacks are even going to be a playoff team. Kind of hard to imagine. As we mentioned, Leila Annie Fernandez is on the court right now, taking on Eva Svitolina. She's actually got a break point right now in the first set, up 3-2. Felix Auger-Aliassime is on court a little later on today, looking to make it to the semifinals. He is minus 185 favorite over the 18-year-old Spaniard Alcaraz Garcia. A little later on, Sasha Zverev and Novak Djokovic, heavy favorites to make it to the semifinals. And oh wow, Leila just did it. She's broken Eva Svitolina. She's up a break right now, serving at 4-2 in the first set. I'll mention, I'm not bothered going down this. Canada does have a big game though for the men's national team coming up on Wednesday against El Salvador. Kind of dive into some of the betting stuff tomorrow on the Lock Shop. By the way, we moved the Lock Shop to tomorrow morning because we didn't have the CFL lines yet. Tomorrow before Winnipeg Sports Talk, around 11:45 Winnipeg time, Dustin Nielsen and I will fire it up. We'll get all over the CFL matchups for this weekend, as well as that Canada-El Salvador game for World Cup qualifying a little bit later on. But big draw for Canada on the weekend, Reem. I know everyone was really focused in on the Bombers and the Riders. Canada goes into Nashville. Kyle Larin with the equalizer, and Canada gets a huge point on the road in World Cup qualifying. They now have 2 draws so far. Really need a win on Wednesday to get to 5 points through the first 3. But we're seeing now playing like that against a team like the United States, who has dominated CONCACAF over the course of the past 20 years or so, along with Mexico. Exciting times for Canadian soccer. And I know a lot of people maybe missed it because they were watching the football game. I recorded it, watched it afterwards. I mean, there's some good things happening with our Canadian men's soccer team, following in the footsteps, hopefully, of our Olympic champion women.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to watch. I took in the game against Honduras, and I mean, you see right away the talent from a guy like Alphonso Davies and what what a superstar can do for Canadian soccer. Matthew Chinetti of TSN did tweet today. He's not on the field for training at BMO this afternoon. I don't know what that means. Could be a routine thing, but figured that was our update. So Canada, I mean, the soccer, it's exciting. It's on TV now, Hustler. It's not on the streaming channel no one gets. So I think that's a plus as well. Yeah,
the Sunday game was on TSN, but I believe all the other games are on Sportsnet. But Wednesday night from BMO Field, Canada, El Salvador, have to win that game. It was disappointing not to get the win against Honduras. Great result to get the draw against the United States. Have to get 3 points on Wednesday to keep this World Cup dream alive. Oh, and I see Taylor said they had no business winning that game. A draw is a fantastic outcome. BA split. They play El Salvador. Oh, and Hustler's Diet Pepsi's here. Nice drink, Hustler. I got a big one for you today, HDP. It was we're looking forward to crushing this one. I got a long day today. I got 3 more hours on Sportsnet. And then, by the way, tonight, around 8 o'clock our time on all the Cool Bets social channels, I'll be getting together with Chris Abbott and Jake Boland-Moss, very sharp dude, and Pat Gregoire. Final call for NFL bets. We'll be doing that tonight at 8 p.m. on all of the Cool Bet social channels. All right, Reem, let's get to the story of the weekend from the NHL. And that, of course, is Jesperi Kotkaniemi saying au revoir to Montreal, or maybe the Canadians saying au revoir to Kotkaniemi, not matching the offer sheet. First successful offer sheet in the National Hockey League since Dustin Penner in 2007. But we now know why it took the Canadians so long to make their decision. They were working behind the scenes, and while they did lose Kotkaniemi, they pretty much turned around with the draft capital they got from the offer sheet and gave it to the Coyotes, who are doing an everything must go sale right now. So Christian Dvorak is now a member of the Montreal Canadiens for a first rounder and a second rounder in 2024. and Kotkaniemi is going to be making $6.1 million on a one-year deal in Carolina. I can't say I'm surprised that it turned out like this. With everything that we discussed last week on the program, it was going to be really difficult for Montreal to match that offer. And to be honest, I think they get a little bit more cap certainty with Dvorak, who's I think about $4.5 million for 4 or 5 more years. But again, they did really like Kotkaniemi. They picked him 3rd overall. A cautionary tale as to what could happen if you try to do an offer sheet to somebody else in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, we were all waiting until Saturday at like 6 p.m. Or it was 6:30 Eastern. My whole timeline all day, it's like, okay, we're waiting. Let's go, Montreal. And I saw Marc Bergevin say after that he was planning on taking a vacation last week, but obviously had to cancel that once they had the offer sheet. Even
that made Tom Dundon and Waddell even happier when he said that.
And I mean, this worked out for Carolina. First and a third for a guy like that. We'll see if they can sign him long term, as what's been reported. For Montreal, I think they did okay. You lose the guy, you get 2 draft picks, and then you flip the first and the higher of the. But there's so many conditions on that. Higher of
their 2 picks, like whichever pick is higher in the draft. Yeah, presumably a better pick between the Habs and Carolina's pick. Yeah, that's the one that goes to the Coyotes, and then a 2024 second rounder.
So, I mean, I think it worked out for them. If you paid him 6.1, I think it just screwed their whole internal salary cap structure. Suzuki coming up next year, and that I see a lot of takes. They rushed him to the NHL. They kind of stunted his development. Maybe it's something that they learned from here, but I don't think it's a total L for Montreal. They do lose the guy, but they were able to, I think they salvaged it pretty well and flip the picks. And big win for Carolina, but I mean, bigger win for the marketing department of Carolina, who had a lot of fun putting in their profile, offer sheet champions and whatever else they were doing. I'm sure Dundon and Tom Waddell were high-fiving, but it's pretty funny what happened. We can go through their timeline here. That 2018 draft, and there's Aho and Kotkaniemi. Is that what that is?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure who.
Or is that Svechnikov? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. And then, they were just having a blast here, mocking Montreal. So.
Just taking all of those comments from Bergevin about Aho 2 years ago. Yeah. And putting them in all sorts of tweets about Kotkaniemi. He wants to come. He sees the core here. He wants to be a part of that. Blah blah blah. All that. It's pretty expert trolling. What can I say? What's interesting about this though, and we'll see this season, if in early January when they are able to extend Kotkaniemi, whether they have a deal on paper right now that will go in on a longer term deal at a more reasonable, probably a more reasonable number in and around the Christian Dvorak number, I would assume, if you include the 6.1 for this season. So, how this all plays out, because here's the thing, Kotkaniemi, if he doesn't sign anything, still has to be qualified at 6.1 million. And, despite all the fun and the talk back and forth, Jesperi Kotkaniemi at this point, at least we'll see what happens this season, is not anywhere close to a $6 million player in current NHL economics. So they are somewhat betting on the future. But I'll be most interested to see whether they have a deal, kind of like Kevin LeBlanc when he signed the $1 million deal, knowing that there was a bigger deal that was essentially already agreed to down the pipe.
Yeah, the Kevin LeBlanc contract. Great question. Yeah. Great question from waiters in chat. Who gets booed more in Montreal, Scheifele or Kotkaniemi?
Huh. Probably Scheif. Scheif. But
I was going to say
Kotkaniemi's not going to be a fan favorite. I don't think you'll see a lot of 15s in the crowd that night when the Canes return to Montreal for the first time.
I was going to say Kotkaniemi because that's more recent, and Scheifele seemed like it happened so long ago. Maybe people forgot, but once that game, once the hype comes for that game, maybe they'll remember the hit. But how about Kotkaniemi? Although maybe people will be booing Bergevin for his handling of the Kotkaniemi RFA, period, rather than booing a guy for securing the bag. That's what they like to call it.
That's what the kids call it.
That's what the kids call it. Yeah. Securing the bag.
Leylah Fernandez is trying to secure the bag on the first set right now. She's serving at 5-3. We'll keep an eye on through that. All right, the other huge story from the weekend, and this goes back to Friday night. The Blue Jays are back. The Bats are back. The incredible comebacks are back. And I got to tell you, dude, that game on Friday night, if you missed it, the Jays were down 8-2 in the 8th inning. I believe, was it Lourdes Gurriel Jr. hit a grand slam. They ended up tying it up at 8. Then, in typical Jays fashion, bring the pen in and give up 2 in the top of the 9th to go down 8 to 10-8. Couple guys on board, and then once again, the hero, Marcus Semien, drilling a 3-run homer into the stands for an 11-10 Blue Jays win. And that got things going. A 3-game sweep of the Oakland Athletics, who they were chasing in the wild card race. A couple big wins over the Yankees, and they've now won, 5 in a row, Reem, and are just 3 games out of the second wild card. With the number to play, and we said, this is possible, but they needed to go on a legitimate run, and to do it against teams that they're chasing in the fashion that they did, the entire atmosphere and conversation around the Blue Jays is a hell of a lot different than it was on Thursday.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Robbie Ray was just named one of the players of the week as well. And I mean, all the talk on my Twitter is, the Blue Jays better get in the playoffs this year because they may not have Marcus Semien or Robbie Ray next year. Those guys are coming to get a big payday. And yes, Robbie Ray, player of the week, Keegan Matheson just tweeted. 13 innings, 2 earned runs, 20, an obscene 20 strikeouts, and what do you have? 4 walks, 5 hits again. So what a stat line there for Robbie Ray. And they're going to need more of that. They are playing the Yankees tonight. It's going to be a tough battle. Steven Matz against their ace Garrett Cole. But I think if you were down on the Blue Jays, and we spoke with Andrew Stone before, he said, hey, they're not quite out. They might be down, but they got a little less than a month left. But you have these games against the Yankees. It's helping that the Red Sox has, their whole lineup has COVID. And they're basically rostering I don't say AAA team, but not their full roster. So Blue Jays are playing well at the right time. They're going to have to keep it up for the rest of the month. But 3 games, it's not out of the question.
Well, and as Theo mentions, they got these next 2 games against the Yankees. And then guess who? The Baltimore Orioles. So they're on a run right now, but they need to stay on this run to get right into the mix. And if that's the case, we've been talking about, can the Blue Jays have meaningful playoff-style games in September? The answer to that will be yes. And if they can turn that into a playoff spot, the bottom line is the way the starting rotation is right now with Berrios and with Ray, and I'm still a big Ryu guy, my God, if they get the bats going, Green, and they get a little bit of momentum, especially a team like that seems to have so much fun, I sure as hell wouldn't want to play them in a short series.
No. And, we joked about, we talked so much how their pitching wasn't there to start the year. They had Ryu, but you weren't sure. Robbie Ray emerged as, Cy Young favorite right now. And, Jose Berrios, he's good. Ryu, that's a really good 1, 2, 3. If they can get the bullpen sorted, I know Julian Merriweather, I saw that he has been throwing now in AAA, and he was lighting up the gun to start the year before he got hurt.
Oh, so Merriweather, I wasn't familiar with Merriweather and was catching some of his games at the beginning of the year. And I'm like, maybe this could be their fireballer that they've been looking for. And then, of course, got hurt. But he's now in a spot where if he can come back and add to the Blue Jays bullpen situation, I mean, you're getting healthy at the most important time of the year. But the bottom line is they're not leaning on the bullpen as much as they have been in the past because of the quality starts they're getting from the guys led by Ray. And, of course, Berrios was phenomenal on the weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And move on from the Jays. We did just have a breaking hockey signing. The Sens have inked Pierre Dorion to a new contract test.
Okay.
Let me just see. I don't know. Do they release GM salaries? I don't know if that is there a cap friendly for GMs? It just says they've extended him through 24, 20, 25. So that coming out 20 minutes ago during our conversation.
You know what?
here.
That's good for Dorian. I'm a fan of Dorian, actually. And I think they've done, he's made some very tough decisions and he's been dealt some pretty difficult cards to handle over the course of the last few years with the way things bottomed out with that club. Of course, the Erik Karlsson trade ended up turning out pretty good for Ottawa. It's been an absolute disaster for San Jose. And now they're getting the job done, locking up some of their young core pieces. Yep. They did it first with Chabot. They got Paterson done last year. It is, though, concerning from a sense of perspective, though, how important Brady Tkachuk is to that team, how much they want him to be inked long-term, put the C on his chest and go ahead for the next 9 years. And, from all accounts coming out of Ottawa, not a lot of progress right now. And Brady Tkachuk's not heading to Ottawa until he's got a deal.
Yeah, so they signed Pierre Dorian. I like what Ottawa's doing. They seem to be primed to be very strong in the future. Tim Stützle with the rookie season as well. And so we'll wait and see Tkachuk. This could go down us to the wire, could go down to training camp, the start of the season. Will he miss training camp? I guess we're kind of watching some of these RFAs, Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson in Vancouver. But Dorian, they like what he's done, seem to be rebuilding them, and they got him now until 24, 25. The club has an option for the year after, too. So, he's been GM. Been GM for a while now. Named GM in 2016. I know they went to that conference final that was unexpected.
They were a goal away from being in the Cup final.
Yeah.
I mean, it was Game 7, tie game against Pittsburgh before they ended up losing. And then within about 9 months, it seemed like that entire team had been blown up.
Yeah, I know. And the Erik Karlsson trade, and I mean, if they would have signed Erik Karlsson to the contract that San Jose did, would not be looking as good, as bright for Ottawa. That's a lot of money locked up in a guy that hasn't performed to that level. So we'll see. Yeah. I don't think Dorian's done anything like to not earn the opportunity to move this forward. They seem to be in a really good position. They realized where they were at. They knew that there was going to be a couple tough years. They made a lot of trades. They've drafted a lot of players. I mean, in a lot of ways, they're trying to follow what Winnipeg did. Just Winnipeg was never at that point where they bottomed out the way that that the Ottawa Senators did. Yes, and by the way, BA for sure, Alec Manoah, he has been a revelation this year and a huge, huge part of what's turned around for the Blue Jays. Little U.S. update, open update for you. Canadian Leylah Annie Fernandez has won the first set. Wow. Her last 2 matches, she lost the first set and was down a break in the second set before battling back, winning the second and winning in the third. Be interesting to see how she handles playing with the lead against one of the top players on earth in Eva Svitolina. Don't forget, a little later on, Felix Auger-Aliassime will be playing for Canada, trying to get to the semifinals. He's a significant favorite. Leylah was the biggest underdog of any of the matches on the women's side, but not as big of an underdog as she was the last couple matches. I think people are very much paying attention. Celebrated her 19th birthday yesterday, practicing. They brought her a bunch of cupcakes and an autographed copy of Billie Jean King's book. So she really has turned into a rock star at the U.S. Open. And I'll tell you what, she's got a ton of support right now playing, I believe, on Arthur Ashe Stadium, looking for a spot in her first ever semifinal in a Grand Slam. All right, Reem, let's get to some picks before we are finished up. We might be able to go a little harder with the missing yesterday's Monday night start. We've got 2 games left. Where are you at for your selections for tonight's Assiniboia Downs action? I have my picks in. I just did the normal $20, so I can switch that if you want, but this is what I'm going to rock. I'll pull it up, and here we go. HPI bet. Go to my Assiniboia Downs. I got a favorite at us. You can pull it up real quick. So race 2. I had this $3 left over race 2. I'm just going for. Oh no, sorry. This is my one. This is my guy. Race 2. Horse 3. Gooch Express. $5 to win. That is my guy. Gooch Express. He's one of the program selections. Also, maybe the best name in the business. Race 4, I had $3 left over. I'm going for a long shot here. Number 5, Quest for Fire. So I'm just taking a stab. That's not expecting to win, but I had some leftover money. I'm going with you, Huss. The triactor boxes, I got 2 of them. Race 6, I'm going 136, Call the Cops, Guaranteed Delivery, and Impressive Sense. So you get that long shot in there, hope for a big payday. And then race 7, I'm on 268, Benroy, Not Afraid, and Bear Brian. So those are my selections. I got $20 on 4.
Nicely done. All right. Let's get to race number 1 for my selection. I am going to go with horse number 1, Wits Coco. Wits Coco's coming off back-to-back wins. 9-5 opening. Not sure what that will be, but I'll probably make a bit of a larger bet than the usual 2 or 5. Maybe put 10 on Wits Coco to try to get some positive momentum. Race number 2, I'm gonna go with Bucky's Pick. Shout out to Connor Hellebuck. You put Buck in a name, I'm giving it some love. So we'll go with number 5 to win. Then over to race 3. We're going to do a quinella between number 3, Midnight Salute, and number 5, Wits Taquito. And then let's move over to race number 6. You know what? I'll go with one of those as well. Call the Cops, Guaranteed Delivery, and Impressive Sense.
Yeah.
We'll put those ones together.
That's what I got.
You go? Okay, well,
we're on the same page.
Let's go 136. I'll ride with you on that. I figure we'd have a good one. That could be nice. And then the final race number 7. We got a couple bigger favorites at the end. Well, there's 9 races in this one.
Yeah.
Muskoka is back. Muskoka has actually been quite good. Not Afraid looking good. I'm going to go with 6 to win. And then I'm going to go 6 with Muskoka, which is 9. And how about, what do we have here? Right of Vengeance? Benroy, 15 to 1. That'll be a nice one if it works. So 6-9-2 in race number 7. Again, still a few days left of live racing. Get out to the track if you can. And otherwise, you can see it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, hpibet.com. You can make your wagers there. Now watch all the action on the YouTube channel at Assiniboia Downs. Remis, what's going on tonight? Just more prep for your DraftKings lineups for the CFL and NFL week?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Is there U.S. Open on Felix? Felix playing?
Felix is on tonight, hopefully in and around 7 o'clock. It's always neat. You know, you look at these start times for the games, but you don't really know when they're happening because it all depends on how long the last matches were. And that's why we've had sometimes matches starting at 10:30 our time, 11:30 in New York, and finishing in and around 2 a.m. But I'll tell you what, you got a bit more of a lubricated crowd under the lights. That's what makes the U.S. Open what it is and why it is, for me, from a viewing standpoint, probably from a spectator standpoint as well, the best Grand Slam of them all.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I couldn't believe they were playing last night and it ended at 2:15 a.m. local time. That seems absurd to me, but that's how it goes.
Taylor, yes, there is a new DraftKings. Well, the new CFL contest is out. Get in there, reserve your spot, and then tomorrow we'll do our first NFL week 1. And to me, NFL is the best, much like for things with betting. Football sort of was the start. Well, I guess baseball was the start of fantasy and roto. But when it comes to any fantasy sport, the nature of, one game a week, having it on the weekend, all of them at the same time, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And I imagine that one will fill quickly. So make sure to pay attention, put your notifications on if you can. I'm not sure whether that's any better than it was last year because I know that drove both of us crazy, Remis.
Yeah, and shout out to Taylor, who finished 5th in yesterday's in the week 5 contest. I know she's placed before. Yeah, so Taylor, she's trying to parlay those winnings into more winnings. So well done. A couple notes from the weekend, Huss. I wanted to get your thoughts on...
Hold on a second. Ryan Friesen. Ryan, we love having you here, but I'm not sure whether you purposely try to have the worst takes or just consistently drop the worst takes ever. The Brady over Mahomes take, I'll leave that. But the Jays takes earlier, I have a feeling I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You're just coming here to stir it up and are that guy on the internet that is just trying to get a rise out of everyone else.
Having monitored the chat for the last week, I'm going to say there is some enjoyment. So there you are, Huss, falling in for the trap.
I did.
Of someone posting bad takes and then getting mad. I mean, just have people in here, right? Casey sucks. Mahomes is a bad quarterback. Mahomes choked in the Super Bowl. And then all of a sudden your blood pressure goes up.
Yes, I'll laugh about it. I have a lot more time for Ryan's Brady and Mahomes takes and even stuff on from the Jays than on some of the COVID takes we had earlier on. Shout out to Remis for getting back into the ring. Couple of eliminations over the top rope. We appreciated that. We appreciate that as well. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a great show. As I mentioned, if you're not sick of me yet, in an hour or so, I'll be jumping on for 3 hours with the guys in Calgary on Sportsnet 960. Tonight, 8 p.m. on all the Cool Bet social channels. We're getting together with Chris and Pat Greggy and Jake Bowen-Moss for a full NFL preview show. That's going to be a lot of fun. Feel free to join us. Would love to see you there. And then tomorrow we'll be back at it. We will be doing a special lock shop tomorrow morning. We're back to 2 days a week. We'll always be doing Friday shows, getting ready for NFL, but we're usually going to be doing a Tuesday show with the Monday game. We didn't have the lines in time, so tomorrow about 11:45 on Twitter. I'll tweet it out. You can see it on Dustin Nielsen, but if you're listening to the podcast, make sure you pop in Apple, Spotify, put in the lock shop. You can subscribe to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And don't forget, if you're able to join us, would love to see you pop down and say hi. Boston Pizza City Place, 7 o'clock on Friday. Dusty, myself, Chris will be banging out a live taping of the Lock Shop, talking NFL Week 1 and getting into some pre-Banjo Bowl hijinks downtown. Would absolutely love to see you there. And again, do not forget, a little later on today, we will have the posts up so you can enter for the Canadian Club Special Edition CC Chronicles 42-year-old whiskey. We're going to the top shelf, folks, for this week's contest. Big shout out to James and the gang at Canadian Club. And I imagine there'll be quite a few CCs being poured Saturday afternoon in the rematch between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Fingers crossed, we'll be talking about at least one, if not two Canadians in the U.S. Open semis tomorrow. We may have to place a call to John Horn, one of our great tennis go-to guys, depending on what happens today. But definitely, if you're with us live, flick it on to TSN 3. You can see the rest of this match. We'll talk about it tomorrow one way or the other. We'll certainly discuss the latest with Felix Auger-Aliassime. He's a favorite tonight, has a good chance of getting to the semifinals. More on the Banjo Bowl, more on the upcoming NFL season, the latest from the NHL offseason, and everything else to do with Winnipeg sports here. And by the way, Reem, just before we go, want to give a big shout out and congratulations to the Winnipeg Goldeyes. They lost yesterday, did not make the playoffs, finished off their season, but what a crazy season it has been. Starting off in Jackson, Tennessee, coming back to Winnipeg at one point, but it was Kyle Wilson. I mean, an all-time RBI record for the American Association. I think a lot of people think that he might be able to jump on with a major league organization after the year that he had for the Goldeyes, and that's what it's all about. And then on top of all of this, the Goldeyes today, check out all their social streams or the YouTube, a 1-minute video announcing a real significant rebranding for the Winnipeg Goldeyes for the first time in a long time. If you're with us on the screen, you can see the look. A new style of a jersey, a new style of logo, which is a pretty significant departure from the old angry fish or the fish beforehand. But I got to tell you, it's obvious that a lot of work went into. It's a very sort of classic logo. It's a very interesting combining the fish and the G. And honestly, I just want a regular season. They could be wearing anything, and we'd be there next year as we hopefully get more and more back to normal and get a full season of fish baseball down at Shaw Park.
Yes, would love a full season of, regular fish ball at the ballpark. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to make it down this year, but I'd love to take my son and family down next year for a game. Great way to spend an afternoon or an evening. And, here we are scrolling through the logos. I will definitely miss. I'm a big fan of the OG fish, but this is a nice modern rebrand. That's for sure. I like the way that it looks on a hat here. I think this is pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
So I'm looking forward to some new merch coming out from it. These bags I think are pretty awesome. So so this is the Gold Eyes weekend.
And I imagine we'll probably have new jerseys and stuff. I do want to get my hands on one of those road gray Winnipeg jerseys if they're changing. Those ones are absolute classics.
This
Love those so
you know
far.
what this means, Hess, that they have a rebrand. It means the old gear is going to go on clearance. So I got my eyes on the Gold Eye store for some deals.
Some Emery approved deals. We'll let you know. We'll let Andrew know if they're doing any sort of a clear out. We'll certainly get him on. But we'll talk about this at some point with them and really wrap the entire crazy season, the second of 2 in a row. Fingers crossed that the team will be able to get back to the ballpark next year under normal circumstances with normal crowds and a normally great season of summer baseball downtown.
Yeah, well said. And there's Jeff Cabillas. He's like, ooh, that lid. I really like this one, this red one that's on the screen with the icon logo. I think
pretty
it's cool.
sharp.
Yeah, I think it's sharp. So I'll have to look when they get the merch out and take a look at their inventory.
You got it. All right, folks. We'll see what Layla and she is down love 40 right now. Looks like Svitolina. This is going to be a war. We'll watch the rest of this tennis this afternoon. See you tomorrow, 1:00, right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Thanks again to Manitoba Battery, Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, Canadian Club. Don't forget to check our social feeds to enter in the amazing prize, the Canadian Club Chronicles. We're going to do that on Friday with the marble race at the end of the show. Not Autocorp, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza. Check out their Burger Week selections, Assiniboia Downs, and coolbet.com. And once again, thanks to Breezy Ben for being with us all season long. And congratulations to Pat Cantlay for winning that Tour Championship and $15 million on the weekend. All right, gang, enjoy the tennis. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, my God. Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.